Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin. Hold the line. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Now, holding the line at the 20-week moving average, historically speaking, has never been an easy task, to say the least. Okay? And it is now that we find ourselves testing the 20-week moving average again, give or take about $1,000 or so. Okay, so this is the chart for Bitcoin. You can see, if we look at a little bit of our recent history here, back in April and May, we were too far gone to hold it as support. Right? We were not able to hold it as support. It had been too long since we had tested it, and we were too far gone. From there, we fell all the way down to the 50-week moving average, and then we had a bounce. Okay? But we always said, getting a 70, 80% bounce off the 50-week, it's no big deal, right? Like, that is something that we've seen many, many times. Okay, let's just go take a look if you don't believe me. All right, so we had a fairly sizable bounce, more or less off the 50-week over here. This is about a 50% bounce or so. If you go back in time and look at other times when we bounced off the 50-week moving average, there was another example, 55% or so. You go back even further, here is another example. So bouncing off the 50-week is not challenging, okay? This is what Bitcoin does. Usually when it's above the 50-week and it goes down to the 50-week, it gets a bounce, okay? So that's not the hard part. That was never the hard part. The hard part is not continuing to go back down, okay? That's the hard part. Staying above the 20 weeks, staying above the bull market support band. That is the hard part for Bitcoin, all right? And when we look at this chart, we say, well, so far, we've at least gotten a bounce off the 50-week, okay? So at the very least, it's a dead cat, right? At the very least. Now, hopefully, we are able to hold the line. All right, this is what we would all hope, is that we are in fact able to hold the line. Now, some people would say that this is nothing more than a dead cat bounce that's going to ultimately take us down to like $10,000. All right, this is sort of the bare line of thinking, is to say, well, we're just going to go down to $10,000 now, and unfortunately, rather than a lot of people have a rational discussion on why the bulls or the bears think the way they do, everyone is of course incredibly biased towards what they think. And to be completely honest, both sides have evidence to support their case. If they didn't have evidence to support their case, they probably wouldn't be as convinced of what they think is going to happen, okay? So, at the very least, we've had a bounce off the 50-week. And now Bitcoin finds itself trying to figure out if it can hold the line. Now what you'll notice is actually the 20-week SMA is converging to the 50-week. All right, you can see that it's converging here to the 50-week. They're more or less slowly approaching one another. However, we do know that the 20-week over the next couple of weeks is in the process of leveling off as long as Bitcoin holds the line. If Bitcoin dumps in the next couple of weeks back down to this area, then we will of course see the 20-week continue to drop. The only thing that will allow the 20-week to level off at the very least, and maybe even start to move back up, is in fact if Bitcoin holds the line. All right, if it doesn't hold the line, then we, as I said before, right, we'll have 3 more months. That's what we said back in May, right? If we drop here, we have 3 months before we probably get back above it. We had 3 months. If we drop again, 3 more months. I always said we need 3 to 6 months before we can get back on track. So far we've had 3. Personally, I'm fine. I'm fine with if we hold it here. I'm ready to go. I certainly use this as an opportunity over here to DCA into the market. If we fall below, we need to recognize that the opportunity that it brings, hopefully it does not send you running for the hills only to return whenever Bitcoin makes new all-time highs. So remember to stay diligent, okay? So this might be an interesting thing to look at because you can in fact see the 20-week is converging with the 50-week moving average. Now, the last time this happened, when the 50-week was coming from below, was here in March. Okay, and it's always interesting to know, how would the market have played out if we hadn't had the pandemic and the stock market didn't crash like 30-40% and whatnot. What would have happened with Bitcoin? Were we ready to take off at that time, or was it that dump that catalyzed the move that followed? We'll never really know. There exists a universe somewhere, theoretically speaking, where that did happen and we didn't have a pandemic, and there's a chart that maybe they're looking at that is different than the one we're looking at. But this is what we have to work with. We came back down to the bull market support band back in March of 2020. However, we were unable to hold it as support, and we ended up getting a catastrophic drop in the short term, but the people that hung on were the ones that ultimately saw the highest gains, and especially the people that just continue to DCA in this territory. These are the ones that ultimately saw the highest gains. So we look today, and Bitcoin's at 41.4K, okay? And we are converging. The 20-week SMA, the 50-week SMA, they're all converging. If you're curious, the 20-week now is at 40,000.5K. Again, it's going to vary depending on the exchange. I've seen it as 40.4, 40.5, somewhere in that ballpark. The 21-week EMA is at 43.3, so it's a couple $1,000s above where we are currently. But the 50-week is actually at 39.3. Okay, so this is going to be a really interesting spot to keep an eye out on, because the 20-week again and the 50-week are converging, and they're converging around $40,000. Okay, so they are in fact converging at around $40,000. And if we try to dubiously speculate as to when they will converge, it's hard to do so because the 20-week will start to level off. But if we just sort of stretch out the 50-week a little bit and speculate that it'll continue more or less moving up at the rate it's moving up, and let's suppose that the 20-week continues to do something like this, it's going to be a close call whether the 20-week can pull back up before crossing the 50-week or not. And if it can, it'd probably look really bullish, right? If it could do that, it'd probably look really bullish. But you can in fact see that they are converging at around $40,000. Now, it might be interesting, now that I think about it, let's go look at this moving average, or moving average division, I should say. Because we've looked at this is the 100-week divided by the 200-week, but it might be interesting to look at the 20-week divided by the 50-week, right? So let's go look at the 20-week divided by the 50-week and see how that looks. So this is the 20-week divided by the 50-week. Let's make this a different color so that we can see it a little bit better. Let's make it yellow. And then from here, we'll draw a line at 1. And the reason we're drawing a line at 1 is because if we're above that line, then it means that the 20-week is above the 50-week. If we're below it, then of course it means the opposite, right? It means the 20 weeks below the 50. So 20-week above the 50 if it's above 1, 20-week below 50 if it's below 1. What you'll notice is there's several times in history when the 20-week was below the 50-week. And one of them was over here during this sort of accumulation phase. All right, this was an accumulation phase leading into what was to come. All right, if you go back and look at it in September of 2014 through November of 2015, it was another accumulation phase before what was about to occur. Right, it was an accumulation phase, and then over here, June of 2018 until June of 2019, it was another accumulation phase. Right, but then we actually had this weird thing in 2019 where we went below it a little bit. But I would argue it's still all part of the same market cycle as measured from market cycle bottom. But we did in fact go below it just slightly. And one of the reasons, again, is because we had the dump that occurred with the pandemic, right? With the pandemic and the stock market dumped, Bitcoin dumped, everything more or less dumped at the time. So what I'm looking at this point is not a prolonged bear market, not like a 3-year bear market accumulation phase type thing where we just kind of pack our bags and we'll see each other in 2025 or something. I'm more so looking out for just one of two scenarios. And I mean, it's somewhat deterministic, but well, of course, we'll see how things go. But if we don't hold the 20 week, then things could get nasty, right? I mean, if especially have some repeat of what happened over here. That's why I would say it is very important that Bitcoin hold the line, because we don't want to know, I imagine that most market participants don't want to explore what happens if we have to go back below. Like, do we hold 29K again if we go back down to 29K? Do we go below it? What happens in that scenario? So I would say, generally speaking here, the key thing to watch is simply, can Bitcoin hold the line here at the 20-week SMA, which is also converging with the 50-week SMA over the next several weeks? Can we hold the line and then go into a new leg of the cycle? Or are we going to get some type of capitulation event that's ultimately going to take us below? And I think we'll have to wait a little bit longer to find out. I mean, the answer to this question is probably coming relatively soon in Q4, if I had to guess. Not necessarily that even if the next leg begins in Q4, not necessarily saying that it has to end in Q4, but I imagine we're going to get some resolution in the next few weeks as to whether we're going to hold it or not. Remember, holding the 20-week never feels good. It never really feels that great. But then when you look back at it in hindsight, it can always feel obvious, right? I mean, like, look back over here in August, September, and October. It seems obvious now, right? But back then, a lot of people were scared. A lot of people were calling for $3,000 Bitcoin. We had the Gap Boys calling for $9,600 Bitcoin so that it could fill the daily CME gap, which we said was completely ridiculous, right? We said it was completely ridiculous to wait until $9,600. And you can see Bitcoin sort of laughed at those people because it went all the way down to 9,800, but did not go to 9,600 to fill that gap. And just think, there's probably some people that are still waiting for that $9,600 Bitcoin that never came, right? It never came. And in fact, instead, we ended up going all the way up to $64,000. So we have a little bit more work to do. This is our 4th week now of testing the bull market support band. Now, arguably, we are below the 21-week EMA, which is not ideal. We would like to be above both of them, but we are still, at the present time, holding on to the 20-week SMA, which is a good thing, right? I mean, beggars can't be choosers. It's a good thing that we are at least so far holding the line at the 20-week. So let's continue to keep an eye on it. I mean, if we fail to hold it, then what my speculation is, we're going to go through another 3-month period like this one, where we sort of just get some long lull in the market and everyone starts moping around again, and then we then eventually come out the other side. That's my thinking if we don't hold it here. If we hold it, though, then we should have clear skies ahead. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. Remember, we do have the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com if you want to know how I'm navigating these markets. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Bye.